Welcome to Delivering Miracles, a podcast to teach women like you tips and strategies on how you can have a safer pregnancy so you can bring home a healthy baby. I'm your host and your high-risk pregnancy expert, Parijat Deshpande. I can't wait to chat with you. Delivering Miracles is a proud member of Parents on Demand, a network of high-quality shows for families like yours and mine. Download the free network app on any Apple and Android devices and listen to your favorite episodes on the go. Confusing, infuriating, unfair, ridiculous, insane. These are some of the words that I hear from so many women in my community to describe their experience of infertility and fertility treatment. Actually, there are more, but I don't know if children are listening to this podcast, so we'll stick with those for now. It's a hard road. It's challenging physically, emotionally, relationally, spiritually, mentally, on every level. And so I am really glad to have one of my favorite fertility specialists back on Delivering Miracles, Dr. Aimee Eyvazzadeh, to answer your questions, because I know there's so many questions when it comes to infertility, fertility treatment. So I'm just going to introduce her and we're going to jump right in because there's so much we have to cover. If you don't know her already, Dr. Aimee is amazing. She's known as the Egg Whisperer and is one of America's most well-known fertility doctors. Her success rate at baby making is what gives future parents hope when all hope is lost. She's had a hand in creating thousands of happy, healthy babies. She is a Harvard-educated board-certified OBGYN specializing in reproductive endocrinology and infertility, but it's her egg freezing parties that put her in the limelight and made her a media darling. She has been featured in magazines like People and Marie Claire, and has been featured on The Today Show, Good Morning America, CBS Morning, Fox Network, along with a number of local and international newscasts too. And in her off time, which I'm so surprised she has any, Dr. Aimee is a mom to 4 rambunctious young kids aged 9 and under. Her goal is to teach everyone how to become fertility aware and get ahead of infertility. And she's just amazing. I'm so honored to have you back. Thank you for being here.
I love talking to you. Thank you for all the work you're doing, just making infertility a subject that people just are more comfortable talking about.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I know going through it myself, it was just like, I know I'm not the only one, but why is there nobody to talk to? What is going on? So we talk about it. We talk about all the hard stuff because we're all going through it. So we have so many questions from so many of the women in my community who just they want to know more. They want to be more informed. They want to be more educated. They want more clarity. So let's just jump in. If you're ready, we can just start with the first.
Yes.
Okay. So this one is close to my heart. Many of them are actually, but this one, what is secondary infertility and how do I know if I have it?
Yeah. So secondary infertility is what I deal with quite a bit. And I consider myself a fertility mythbuster. And what I mean by that is one of the most common fertility myths is, if I get pregnant with baby number 1, baby number 2 will be a piece of cake. And that's actually perpetuated by family, friends, media, sometimes even your OBGYN. But what I want to tell people is get your levels checked. You had a baby, go back in. A simple blood test like an AMH will give you an idea as to how you should plan your next pregnancy so that you're not one of those people that waited, let's say 3 or 4 years to start trying to have a baby, then tried for a year to only find out that you're dealing with something that's super common, which is called ovarian aging. So I try and educate people about that because maybe you try a little bit earlier. Maybe you do an egg freeze. Maybe you freeze embryos, but at least you have the information so you can plan out your family and not deal with this tough condition, which is trying to get pregnant with your next baby, and it's just not happening.
Absolutely. And it's infuriating. It is. And it's so lonely because you're right. Everybody's like, well, it happened once. Don't worry, just relax. It'll be okay.
Exactly.
So a personal follow-up question to this. Is secondary infertility defined by getting pregnant once, or is it carrying to term? Where do you draw that line?
So for me, if you're, let's say, having miscarriages and still haven't had a live birth, I would consider that a different situation than, let's say, secondary infertility. I know people sometimes get labeled as having secondary infertility, but for me, that also assumes that you've had a baby already. And so secondary to me means you've already carried a baby and delivered, and now you're trying for your next and just aren't having as much luck.
Got it. I wonder how this applies to preemie parents, because I know I'm thinking about it and I'm like, well, I do have a son, but he survived because of medical interventions after he was born, not because he was ready to be born.
Sure. Yeah. In that kind of scenario, I would use the term secondary infertility.
Interesting. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is what we have for secondary infertility. And I think what I love that you said is be informed. So don't assume, just be informed, get all the information about what's going on with your body, and then you know what options you have going forward.
Exactly. Simple tests will teach you about what actions you need to take. And then based on data, you can see what you need to do about your fertility and not be, spending so much time Googling things where you can use data to drive your decisions.
Absolutely. So here's a nice follow-up question to that, which is what fertility tracker or tracking method do you recommend?
So I actually ask patients not to temp and not to do BBTs.
Oh,
I
thank
find
you.
that temping and charting like this can create a condition called obsessive compulsive disorder and severe anxiety and general anxiety disorder in patients who never had it.
Absolutely.
And so also disrupting your sleep, for example, and setting an alarm at 5 a.m. can be very disruptive. It can be disruptive to you and your partner's, if you have one, sleep patterns. So I recommend listening to your body, and you're very good at teaching your patients how easy that is to do and to trust your body.
Yeah.
So look at your body's symptoms, signs of ovulation. Egg white cervical mucus usually starts a few days before ovulation. And as far as a simple test that people can do, there's a very simple type of OPK or ovulation predictor kit that I ask people to consider purchasing. And it's the litmus paper test where you have the control line and then the test line that will get darker and darker as you get closer to ovulation. I find those are a lot better than the blinky test, the blinky smile or the solid smile. The digital test is what I'm referring to.
Those are also just torture because when you don't see the smiley face, you're like, okay, screw you.
Yeah, and you think that you're supposed to be passing a test, and these tests are very accurate, and they're actually quite inaccurate. And a lot of times they're not that helpful because people can think they're ovulating when they're really not. One of the most confusing things is when you have a positive and people keep checking. And they say, oh, it was positive for 5 days. And then 5 days later, I checked again, it was positive again. So I ovulated twice. And I would say, those things don't happen. Once you have a positive, stop checking. And there's a really cool new test. So you can check LH in your urine, but you can also check progesterone now. So the website.
Really?
Yep. So the website is mfbfertility.com, and they use Amazon to sell their tests as well. So it's, basically to confirm ovulation, we know that progesterone level goes up after ovulation. So you can do the LH test and then days later, check to see if you have that progesterone rise. And the test also can help you consider maybe you need progesterone supplementation early if it shows that, let's say, your progesterone levels aren't high enough. So I think that's a helpful tool, and it's very similar to the OPK strips that I just described to you, where you have a control line and then you have a test line, and they're fairly easy to read.
Oh, that's fantastic. So we're going to have that link in the show notes for anyone who wants to purchase those. So you're saying stay away from the smiley tests, stay away from all the dollar store stuff, get the litmus paper tests, and then this mfbfertility.com, the progesterone test to see and check and see what's going on. What about these fertility apps that are coming out? There's so many of them to help track your fertility. What do you think about those?
So what I would tell people is that your fertility doctor, number one, is smarter than your app. So if you ever have a question about what's going on, show somebody. And the other thing I tell people is within these apps, what you don't realize is people are selling your data. So look really carefully at the type of app you're using and what they're doing with your information. There have been a lot of stories out there, and they're actually true, where there have been, let's say, a compromise of someone's data, and all your personal information could now potentially be out there in the world for others to see. So I would say be very careful about those apps, and realize that if something doesn't look right, talk to your doctor. Don't just assume that everything's fine. If you're wondering if you want to, like, what's going on as far as trying to have a baby, don't spend all this time in the app. Go see somebody, get your levels checked. So I would say like an app that a lot of my patients use, for example, is the Glow app. And they have a really nice community,
Right.
but they also do a lot of advertising. So it's like, is that something that you want to, see? If the answer is yes, that might be a good app for you. But if the answer is no, you want to put your stuff in something that, maybe they won't be selling your data, we'll find another app.
Why, I guess kind of as a aside to this, why do you think we have this set up right now where apps are kind of coming up instead of more women being encouraged to see doctors? Where do you think that disconnect is?
Well, it won't be that much longer because I literally am right now working. I have a meeting this afternoon with my technology team to do just that, is to have an app where I will be in real time, be able to communicate with people who are using these apps and help them understand their fertility levels and what they mean for them. And they'll be filling out a fertility questionnaire where I can review the answers and kind of tell them what they should be considering. And it's just based on that simple mnemonic of the Tushy method, where people will be able to get fertility screening done in a very easy way. So it's not as complex, complicated, expensive as a lot of people think that it is. A lot of people think when you think fertility screening, it's confusing. And so within the app, you can also get those tests done. So I'm really excited about that. And I think the reason why these apps are here is because they know that they can get money through advertising. So that's basically what happens.
Sure. And I think there's also the added, I know I hear from a lot of women that to see a fertility specialist means acknowledging there's a problem. And I don't want to acknowledge it's that bad. I think it'll be okay.
Yeah. I mean, and then I just make the analogy, look, if if you had chest pain, you'd go to the doctor. You have uterus pain, you want a baby in your uterus, go see a doctor. This is a medical problem. We should be able to talk about it in 2018 without feeling shame. Like, go see somebody. It's okay. A lot of people do. And when you do, you may not feel as bad as you did before you went.
Yeah, the anticipation is absolutely worse than actually going there and knowing what to do. And best case, your doctor says, hey, everything looks okay. Just keep at it. You'll probably get pregnant soon.
Exactly.
Awesome. You mentioned something that I love, which is your Tushy method. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Yeah. So I want people to have access to easy ways to address infertility and to understand what they should be doing. And not only that, not only about accessibility, but also to reduce the number of treatments people are put through without a proper diagnosis. So one of the things I teach people about in my office is how important diagnosis before treatment really is. I meet people from all over the world and they share stories with me like They were on Clomid for 12 months and no one checked a sperm test or no one confirmed that their fallopian tubes were open and both the fallopian tubes were blocked and the sperm count was really low. So they just wasted a year of their life. And of course they were temping and charting the entire time. So you can imagine how mentally, emotionally, physically exhausted these kinds of patients are. So I want to kind of stop that and have people take action based on the data that's presented to them and know what tests that they can be doing. So the T stands for fallopian tubes. The U is an ultrasound of the uterus. The S is a semen analysis. The H are the hormones. And the Y is your genetic test. And your genetic test could be an extended carrier screen, a reproductive genetic profile, and a cancer gene screen. And so I offer all those tests to my patients here. And by talking about it, by you talking about it, by everyone talking about it, then everyone kind of knows what the basic tests are. And these are tests that people do all over, but putting it in a mnemonic makes it really easy for people to remember.
Yes. And it's so appropriate because the Tushy is very much involved in fertility treatment. So it's perfect. I love that. And this is why I love you and the way that you work, because you're so much about let's get the information first before taking action. And I so wish more doctors were like that, because I wish I had known more about our fertility situation and done more testing before we had started with our very first cycle, but I had no idea. There's not a lot of information. So I'm so glad you're out there and you're doing this, you're talking about it, because it's so empowering for couples to know the more you know, the less you're probably going to have to do.
And that means a lot to me. And the other thing is I can tell you honestly that there are patients that I can help today that I wasn't able to help, let's say 5 years ago, even with how technology has changed. So the message out there is also, if you struggled even 2 or 3 years ago and you've given up, maybe get another appointment, see what changes are out there and see if technology can help you have a baby as naturally as possible. And even with IVF, things have changed so much. Perhaps this is a good time to revisit doing another cycle or another treatment or getting another set of tests done.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Speaking of tests, our next question is about saline ultrasounds. Somebody wrote in that said, I just read that saline ultrasounds shouldn't be painful and that pain could be a sign of damaged tubes even if they're open. When I had mine done, I was in so much pain I had to call my doctor. What do I make of this?
Yeah, so the uterus is a muscle and it's inside the body. If we made men go through the procedures that we do to women without pain medication, I think that, there would be lots of ambulances and 911 calls. But for women, we somehow treat them in a way that we wouldn't even treat, and I don't mean to sound so extreme, but I think that some animals get better care at a vet clinic than some women do at a fertility clinic or OB/GYN's office. And so pain medications are supposed to treat pain. And when you're undergoing a procedure that involves pushing fluid into a muscle inside your body, you can imagine that pain is the expected side effect. But for some reason, women are told things, and people tell me that they're told these things like, oh, what do you think having a baby's going to feel like? And that's just not right.
That's not helpful. No.
So I offer all my patients a Valium and a Tylenol with codeine 30 minutes before the procedure. And they also get antibiotics to prevent infection. But what that means is they have to have someone drive them. They can have a driver like Uber or Lyft or someone like that, but they can't drive themselves. And that makes the procedure extremely comfortable. They don't have anxiety. And then they say, oh, that was great. I didn't have any pain. And I'm like, exactly. So we're good.
Great. So to answer the person's question, so pain doesn't necessarily mean damaged tubes, even if they're open.
Yeah. So the thing is that when I do a saline sonogram, I actually also look at the fallopian tubes. But it is true, if someone has extreme pain and someone isn't doing the saline sono looking at the tubes, then it is possible that there might be a fallopian tube issue. But there's a way that I do the saline sono that looks at turbulence in the fallopian tubes. We call it the bubble test in my office.
Oh, yep.
So if someone isn't looking at the fallopian tubes on that saline sono and they're pushing the fluid in, then it is possible that the fallopian tubes are an issue. So that person may want to follow up with a hysterosalpingogram or a repeat saline sono with pain meds to make sure that, the tubes aren't blocked.
Absolutely. So let's back up for a second. And can you define what is a saline ultrasound? What is an HSG? Just for our listeners who aren't familiar.
Yeah, so a saline sonogram refers to basically a pap smear appointment, basically. Speculum goes in the vagina, but the speculum stays in and a catheter goes inside the uterus, just the very bottom part of the uterus, basically. Then the speculum is removed, a probe is put back in the vagina, and the doctor will then push sterile saline or water into the uterus while looking on the screen. And what we're looking for are polyps, scar tissue, fibroids, anything that can block or interfere with the ability of an embryo to stick and grow. And like I said before, you can also check the fallopian tubes. The difference between a saline sono and HSG is you can see the outline of the fallopian tube. The fallopian tube is the diameter of a strand of hair, and so you can't necessarily see it on saline sonogram unless it's diseased, like a very large hydrosalpinx. But on HSG, with the X-ray, you actually can see the outline of the fallopian tube, and you can give someone a little bit more information about their fallopian tubes than you can give someone when you do a saline sonogram. Just same process, just a little bit different as far as the information you'll be able to get.
And since it requires an X-ray, HSG has to be done at a hospital?
There are some fertility clinics that have the X-ray machine in their offices, but a lot of times we use an imaging center standalone or in a hospital setting.
Okay, so it's worth asking your doctor, where do I need to go to do this?
Exactly. So we use an imaging center that's close to us. There's also a nice fertility center near us that has it, and they're happy to do them for our patients.
Perfect. Awesome. So the next question is a big one. We'll do our best to answer it because the question is, when do I know it's time for IVF? I imagine there's a lot of different factors here.
Yeah. So remember, it's the same thing. Diagnosis before treatment. What's the diagnosis? Do you need IVF to have a baby? And the people that need IVF are folks that have really low sperm counts where IUI isn't an option, or blocked fallopian tubes. Or if you want more kids than your age will allow. So in that case, for example, I'll give you a scenario. You're 37 years old. You would like 3 kids. Well, if you're starting at 37, you won't be able to with your own eggs unless you do IVF. So there's a fertility preservation component to doing IVF. I tell my patients, how many kids do you want? And then at the end of each IVF cycle, do we have enough embryos for you to reach those goals? Should we do more now, or should we try and get pregnant? Because the last thing I want is a patient to look back and say, Aimee, why didn't we do more IVF? or say, I'm really mad that you didn't talk to me about these options. I would have done more IVF had you told me. So that's why it's really important for me to review that. I mean, I've had patients that say, Aimee, I'm okay just moving forward with the one embryo we have. I understand that at 41, when I'm ready for baby number 2, I probably won't be able to achieve another healthy embryo as easily as I did, for example, when I was 37 or 38. And at least I had those conversations with them up front so that when they are 41, they feel like, okay, I thought through this. I made a really good decision for myself. And now I understand why I'm not able to have another pregnancy with my own eggs, and I'm okay with it.
Absolutely. There's one thing you said that just now that really struck home for me, and that I want to reiterate for our listeners, is tell your doctor how many children you want. It's okay to dream, to think about, and to want that. I know when you're first walking in that door and you're faced with fertility challenges, it sometimes feels like, well, I'll just take one. But allow yourself to have a moment to think about, well, how many do I actually want? And then convey that to your doctor, because that might change the plan that you have going forward to allow for you to be able to do that. That's what the doctors are here for. It's to help you build your dream family, however many kids that is. And it's a question I wish we had answered so many years ago.
And no matter what age you're at, and
no matter what
it's really
age.
important, even if you're 42, if you get a healthy embryo, ask yourself, I actually might want to have another pregnancy. You may not, when most of my patients see me, they say, I'd be so lucky to have just one baby. And I say, I understand that. But once you have that one, there's a good chance you might want another.
Exactly. Yep, absolutely. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. It's a great question. I'm going to start encouraging my clients to start talking about that with their fertility doctors too, because it's your family and you have every right to want that and to have a doctor that's going to support you in every way possible to get that as much as possible. So definitely talk about that with your doctor too. The next question is about PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. My doctor says I have PCOS, but I'm not overweight. Is this possible, or are they missing something?
Yeah, so PCOS is kind of a catchphrase for a number of things. So it could be being slim and having glucose homeostasis issues. You can still have high testosterone. You can still have insulin resistance. Just because you have PCOS doesn't mean that you're going to be curvy, be losing your hair, have acne, hirsutism. It can mean a whole number of things. So there are women who are thin, have no of the hair growth symptoms, but just don't have their periods. There are women who are on the heavier side, and they only have their regular periods, but none of the other symptoms. So when I describe PCOS, when I'm making the first time diagnosis, what I tell my patients is we need to balance the hormonal imbalance that you have before you get pregnant. That's really important to me. Absolutely. So for example, if a woman has high testosterone and she has PCOS, we need to treat the testosterone, because guess what? High testosterone has been linked to autism and pregnancy. If you have PCOS and you have high prolactin, well, guess what? We need to reduce that because that's linked to miscarriage. If you have a high hemoglobin A1C, well, that's linked to severe birth defects. So it's not one of those things where, I'm just going to treat my PCOS when I get pregnant and I'll just take fertility pills. You really need to balance out the hormones so that you have the healthiest pregnancy possible. And I don't want people to have miscarriages or birth defects or, children with special needs. Obviously, every child's important and special and precious. But if we take the proper time to review everything during what I call trimester 0 and really get your preconception health checked, no matter what your situation, you're going to go into your pregnancy with the healthiest outcomes possible.
Wonderful. So then are you saying for our listeners who they think they have PCOS or they've been diagnosed with PCOS, is it worth trying on their own? Or are you recommending going to see a specialist, get everything evened out, and then you start trying to conceive?
No, I would see a specialist. Make sure your vitamin D is normal. Make sure your thyroid's normal. Make sure 30% of women with PCOS may have high prolactin levels. Make sure your testosterone's normal. Yeah, so there's a basic panel that I run on anyone with PCOS who wants to conceive. So I think that's really important no matter what your body size is.
Okay, that helps a lot. So again, it goes back to find out what's going on first, address the basics, and then the rest of it might actually be easier than you think.
Exactly.
Amazing. Amazing. Okay. The next question we have is about miscarriages. I've had 3 miscarriages and I'm terrified of getting pregnant again. What can I do to increase my chances of getting pregnant and not miscarrying? I imagine you hear questions like this all the time.
Yeah, I just saw a patient like this. 3 miscarriages. She's had some testing, but not everything. So she found out that she has 2 clotting disorders, but no genetic testing has been done. She's young, but has never had any ovarian reserve tests. So it's really important. it's basically go back to basics. Look at the uterus. Is there an anatomic issue? Think about sperm. Could there be a high DNA fragmentation? That could be in a guy who's, let's say, older. That can contribute to miscarriages. Look at the hormones. Make sure that you don't have a thyroid problem creating this or causing this. Make sure that this isn't because you have a high FSH or low AMH. If it is, it's not like we can quote unquote treat that, but there are therapies that we can use like IVF to help recruit and extract healthier eggs if possible. And then the genetic profiles we do are chromosomes on both the egg source and sperm source, as well as carrier screening to make sure that both are not passing on a disorder that's leading to the miscarriages. I've actually seen that before. So it's really important when you have miscarriages not to fall into believing the fertility myths. Oh, at least you can get pregnant. That's at least good. Because that really doesn't help anyone. No one wants to experience a miscarriage. Miscarriages are the enemy here. Periods are the enemy here. And once I meet someone, I want to make sure they actually never have a miscarriage again if I can help it. So there's a list of tests. It's a basic workup. And we draw blood here. So I just drew the test that I just described to you. So I can give this couple all the answers and not just a partial answer as to what's going on. And we got lots of tools for patients. There's Lovenox, which is a blood thinner, aspirin, folate, progesterone. Depending on what's going on, there is treatment for the most part.
That's amazing. And that's a very empowering answer for those of our listeners who can really resonate with this. There's so many people that have experienced so many losses and they feel helpless and they don't know what else to do. So my question then as a follow-up is, have you ever done all that testing? It all comes back normal and there's no answer for why they keep miscarrying.
No, and I hate the word unexplained. What I tell people is unexplained just means they haven't explained it to you or they haven't looked hard enough. With today's technology and tools, as far as the specialized implantation tests that we can do on the lining of the uterus, the reproductive genetic profile that we can now do, I can tell you that there isn't anyone that I would come up with an unexplained diagnosis for. There's always an explanation. And I know there are probably doctors out there that don't agree with me, but I would sit right across from them right now or with them at a table and just kind of talk to them about, my experiences with all these tests. So one of my patients said to me, Aimee, you science I don't want to use a swear word, but you scienced the heck out of me. And I'm like, I know. She's like, I wish I met you 5 years ago. I'm like, well, honestly, a lot of these tests I didn't even have 5 years ago, but I can offer what I would call like precision fertility medicine or personalized fertility care.
I love this. And this is blowing my mind because how many people are out there right now with this unexplained diagnosis, unexplained infertility, unexplained anything. And it is so hard to wrap your head around because then you don't know when it's time to walk away, what decisions to make going forward. What do you do next besides just continuing to beat your head against the same wall, hoping for a different result?
Exactly.
Wow. Okay. So again, it goes back to if you don't have the answers, if something's going on, and you don't have an answer, keep digging, keep looking, get the information, and then you'll know what to do.
Mm-hmm. Or what I say, ask more questions. Just keep asking.
Keep asking. Absolutely. Okay. Next question we've got is, I guess right related to that. When do I know it's time to stop trying and just walk away? Some days I want to keep doing and keep going. And some days I just feel like it's too much on my body.
Yeah, it's okay to take a break. I mean, just because I have patients that walk away, say, I just need a break. And they come back maybe even 1 or 2 years later and they're like, I'm ready. And that's okay. So just listen to your body, listen to how you're feeling. There's a reason why you're feeling this way and just listen. And then when it's the right time, it's going to be the right time. But there are obviously medical reasons why you should stop. You should stop if you're in a severe depression. You should stop, let's say, if your FSH is over a certain level and you're just not able to get more than one egg recruited. You should stop if, let's say, your partner is not on board or isn't able to produce a sample when you need him, assuming a heterosexual relationship. But you should always talk to a doctor, talk to a fertility therapist, and build your team. I talk about a fertility team a lot, a therapist, exercise, acupuncture, meditation.
Yep.
So make sure you have a team around you, check in with that team, whoever that may be, and then find the right path forward. But if you want a baby, there's so many different ways of building a family now. Modern family building is what we call it. So there's nothing wrong. Adoption, there's everything right and good about adoption. There's embryo adoption.
Sure.
There's so many ways that you can have a family and be a parent.
Absolutely. I think there's a voice in your head that will tell you when it's time. And if that voice is always kind of perking up going, what about one more? What about one more? Even if logistically you have no idea how to make it happen, it's worth a conversation with a fertility specialist. What are my choices? And can we make this happen? It's worth having that conversation. Then with that information, you can decide, do I really want to do that? Do I want to try something else? Or maybe I am actually done.
Good point.
Okay, so the next question we've got, my doctor's recommending a natural IVF cycle with no medications. I don't feel good about this, but she said I ovulate regularly, so it should be no problem. Is this recommended?
Yeah, natural IVF cycles are great when a woman only has one follicle. So there's no point in, giving women massive amounts of hormones to grow more eggs if you just don't have the eggs to grow. But at the end of the day, it is a numbers game. It is. So the more eggs you get, the higher the chance that one will be normal. So the explanation that she's getting, I would humbly say, I don't agree with that, but she should ask more questions and see what about her does her doctor think that she shouldn't be maybe there's something we don't know. Maybe she has a history of breast cancer,
Sure.
But otherwise, even with that history, there are ways that you can get more eggs.
So what are some questions that she or any of our listeners should be asking if their doctor is recommending a natural IVF cycle?
If a doctor is recommending a natural IVF cycle, it's important to ask, do you have an operating room? Am I going to be sedated under anesthesia? Because there's some people that do that because they don't have an operating room. There's no anesthesiologist there. So in this kind of scenario, you would want to know before you go in, because I've had situations where patients tell me, I went and did a natural IVF cycle and I had no idea what they were going to do to me. And I was horrified. But then there are patients that go and they're successful because they knew what to expect going in. They actually did not want hormones. They did not want more than one egg retrieved. And they actually had no problem not having anesthesia. So it's just about what are my chances at my age that I'm going to be successful? And then it's back to the question of how many kids do I want? Is this the right thing for me based on my family size goals? So if let's say you've already had one child and you're 38 years old and you don't want to expose yourself to hormones, well, maybe a natural cycle IVF is right for you if let's say there's a lower sperm count. But maybe it's not if you also wanted a chance to preserve your fertility.
Got it. So this is definitely not for somebody who either has irregular cycles or we don't know if she ovulates or she has some trouble with ovulating or anything like that. This is for somebody who's got consistent cycles and then for a variety of other reasons feels like she does not want or does not need additional medication to produce more eggs.
Yeah, no, you can definitely also do a natural cycle if you have irregular cycles or if you're what I call your fertility windows, let's say closing. You can. It just involves a lot of monitoring, a lot of ultrasounds to see when you're actually going to ovulate.
Got it. Okay. So ask more questions. Ask more questions. Why are they recommending it? Why are you a good candidate for it? And what are you going to expect going in?
Exactly.
When it's time. People actually do egg retrievals without anesthesia?
I know. They do. I know. Ouch.
Yikes. Oh my God. My first egg retrieval, I went into the OR and I hadn't been sedated enough. And so I saw the needle thing that you use. I was like, what the heck is that? So the next time they made sure to make me loopy enough that I wouldn't see it. Goodness. Okay. Where are we? Next question. Oh, okay. So I imagine this comes from somebody who's probably been through a lot. Her question was just one sentence. Why don't we know more about how to get pregnant?
Yeah, so that's the question of the day. Why aren't we like bunnies, cats, and mice?
Yeah.
We are human beings, and that's really why. So patients ask me all the time, why didn't this work? I'm like, because we're human. Unfortunately, being inefficient is just part of the human experience. Having miscarriages is really common, and we need to talk about 30% of pregnancies end in miscarriage. 1 in 100 will end in a stillbirth. So people don't feel like they're all alone, and this is just happening to them. Right. 1 in 8. It's common. Right. It happens. It's not just you, and it's a medical problem. So why don't we know more? Exactly. Like if men ran out of sperm, I can tell you that there would be billions, trillions invested in finding a cure. Right? But for women, we just say, pat, pat, rub, rub, you're 40. Sorry, you're just too old. But that just doesn't fly anymore. It just doesn't. No, so hopefully with all these initiatives that are out there and grants that are being funded by anonymous donors, hopefully we'll find better options for women.
That would be fantastic. Do you find that fertility challenges have gotten worse over the years? I mean, has this medical issue become more common, or are we just talking about it more so we're more aware of it?
No, I think we're just waiting longer and longer to have babies. Sperm counts are getting are going down, and there are more environmental exposures today than there were ever before. And then you see the trends in body size in our country, where obesity rates are through the roof. So obviously, as obesity rates rise, infertility rates will rise as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Another IVF question: should I be on bed rest after a transfer? I've read mixed things online. My first transfer is coming up, and I want to make sure I'm doing everything I can to help my embryo stick.
Yeah. So what I tell patients, this is my thing, and it doesn't mean that it should be theirs. Their doctor might advise something else. So I would definitely listen to your doctor. But I tell my patients, butt to bed, butt to chair, butt to couch, butt to toilet. And you can't cough, sneeze, poop, burp, laugh your embryo out. And do the butt practice for 2 days after your transfer. And then after that, activity as usual. You can't do anything to shake your embryo out of your uterus. You just can't. But keep it mellow, keep it chill, because I can tell you my patients who, and thank goodness it's rare because so many of my patients do genetic testing, when they don't get pregnant, the first thing they say is, oh, I did too much. And so that's why it's really important that I tell people we've done everything we can, everything to give you the best chance for pregnancy. If this didn't work, it's not because you did too much. So take a couple of days to yourself, organize pictures, catch up with old friends, watch really funny movies, but just take it easy. But there are doctors that say, oh, activity as usual, no big deal, go to the gym, do your bar method, do your spinning. But that's just not my recommendation that I have for my patients.
Is there any research that shows that taking it easy actually helps?
Yeah, so the research showed that folks that just got up and did whatever had the same pregnancy rates as patients who didn't. But I can tell you the patients who didn't get pregnant and the group just went off and did whatever, I can tell you from my experience, those patients will feel like they did something wrong, even though we know they didn't.
Exactly.
We know they didn't. So just for that very reason, I think there's value and it's worth it to just take it easy.
I totally agree with that. And those are the people that I end up seeing because there's so much guilt, there's so much grief, there's so much self-blame, and that just adds to their stress levels because they now feel like they were responsible. And what did I do? And oh my gosh, this was me. And they're already feeling that way with fertility challenges as it is. And now there's this on top of it, which is not needed at all, physically, emotionally, whatsoever. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. My OB recommended I see a fertility specialist. How do you know if that doctor is good and can help me? Is it by Yelp reviews, or what questions should I ask?
You just go in and meet them. And obviously talk to your friends, if you feel comfortable doing that. But your friends will look out for you and they'll tell you their experiences. And not every doctor is for every patient. Some patients do really well with more hand-holding, and some patients don't need the hand-holding. So just go in, make your first appointment, make sure that they're listening to you. And one of the first questions I ask my patients is, what do you think is going on? And it's amazing. They'll be like, well, what do you mean? That's what I'm here for. I'm like, no, just listen. Like, your body. And oftentimes they're right. They think it's because they're not having enough sex, or they think it's because, maybe they're not ovulating or having sex at the right time. So it's really important to go to a doctor that will listen to you and offer the guidance that you're looking for. And you wouldn't know unless you went. But certainly, you can go online and look at reviews. But what I tell people is you're never as good. That person is never as bad as their worst review, and they're never as good as their best review. And you can't trust reviews because they can be written by people that aren't patients. Even the negative ones can be totally written by other people that just it's awful. So I tell people just go meet them and see what you think and look for a right fit.
Yeah. And you get a feeling for it. When you walk in the room, you have a conversation with a doctor or any provider or just anyone in person. Like, when you're in the room with somebody, you get a feeling, do I feel comfortable with them or not? If you don't feel comfortable with them, it's not worth it. Walk away, find somebody else. Okay. So the next question is, I keep getting positive home pregnancy tests, but when I go to do my blood draw, it's very low, either below 5 or low. And if I do a second one, it's negative. What's happening?
Yeah, so biochemical pregnancies are really common, but you have to ask that person, are you taking a trigger shot? Because it could be that the trigger shot is still in your system. The trigger shot can be in the system even 10 days after it's given. So if you're finding that you're having early pregnancy tests that are positive and then become negative, it could also be a sign of a tubal issue. So make sure that you're checking your fallopian tubes and that they're open. But it can also be a genetic thing. And when I say genetic, I mean that the egg and sperm are coming together and just not creating a viable enough embryo to stick and grow. So, see a doctor, get checked and see what's going on, because there is a reason why this is happening. And if it keeps happening, you should find out why. But biochemical pregnancies are quite common. But if your goal is a healthy pregnancy sooner than later, you might want to get checked out sooner than later too.
Absolutely. Okay. Next question. This is very interesting. How do immunological issues affect fertility? Is there a connection? My doctor says there isn't, and he doesn't test for things like natural killer cells.
Yeah, so a lot of people can have immune response regulation issues, and there are ways to test for them. One of the ways is to check natural killer cells, but what some people say is, look, the levels in your blood have nothing to do with the levels in your uterus. But what I say is, look, sometimes you just got to think a little bit outside the box, and the treatments aren't that harmful. And the diagnosis is not that expensive either. So sometimes these panels are covered by insurance. Sometimes they're not. So I always talk to patients about what I'm going to do, what I'm going to test, and then what's the treatment and what the costs are associated with it. Because some people would say, oh, I don't even want to pay for the test. Let's just do the treatment, right? Or some people would say, yeah, I definitely want to know, and then I'll figure out if I want to do the treatment or not. But by looking at someone's reproductive genetic profile, I think that's really key. So you can see if they have variants, for example, in the tumor necrosis factor gene or TNF, IL-1A. So those things can tell you if you should go down that route. So that's why looking at the Y and the Tushy, your genetic profile, helps me then understand if I should be looking more deeply into my patient's immune status.
Got it. The terminology natural killer cells sounds terrible. What are these natural killers?
Right? To tell a fertility patient. So we all have natural killer cells in our body. They're the reason why we're walking around and alive and able to fight infection. But in some people, their response to pregnancy is a rise in the natural killer cell level. And what we found is that a very benign treatment called intralipids, I tell people it's like getting a Jamba Juice through your veins, lasts about 2 hours at an infusion center. They might actually lower the natural killer cell level and give you a higher chance of having a healthy pregnancy. Those infusions are done about once a month until you're 4 months pregnant. And every doctor will have their own regimen. And a lot of people don't quote unquote believe in it. But I do feel that I've had some patients, very few, that might benefit from this. And I've seen some great outcomes by adding it as part of the regimen.
Do you feel like they don't believe in it because there's not enough information yet and that it's going to become something that's more routine down the road?
Yeah, I do think that probably in the next 5 years, it will probably be routine testing that everybody does. I really do.
That'll be wonderful. That'll be wonderful, especially if insurance will cover it. That'll be so great to have that. How old is too old to try to have a baby on my own? Is there a difference for age restrictions for using my own eggs versus being pregnant?
Yeah. So, I mean, we don't like to have a woman who's, let's say, over the age of 50, for example. Some centers will allow women over the age of 50 to carry their own pregnancy. But for the most part, right, like Janet Jackson. But for the most part, the oldest woman that I've helped have a healthy pregnancy was 46 years old with her own eggs. And so, obviously she has a normal, not obviously, but she is unusual, right? She's not normal. She had a normal AFSH. She had an AMH of 1.0. Like, that's totally not normal. I joked with her. I said, you're totally abnormal. She's like, what do you mean? I'm like, because you're so fertile at 46. It's like so unusual. And so I was so excited to help her. But I would say like 99.99999% of 46-year-olds, you can barely get one viable egg from them. So it's really important to ask the questions, get your levels checked, talk to someone who'll give you the real deal. And I give people the real deal. But I do understand that there are people who want a chance with their own eggs, even though that they know that they still will use a donor egg just so that they feel like they did everything they could to use their own DNA. And I talk about things as plan A, and it's not plan B, C, or D. It's only plan A. Plan A is you being a parent and then talking about how we're going to do that. Because when you talk about B, C, D, it makes it seem like those other things weren't as good. But it's just all about the ultimate plan of helping you be a parent.
Love that. And it stays right in your focus. And that is what then everybody's working towards, even your doctor. You're together in this going for one thing and one thing only, which is how do I become a parent? I love that. Our final question of the day is, how does diet affect fertility, and does it affect men and women too?
Yeah, so a healthy diet is really important for a healthy pregnancy. I mean, if you're eating pizza and beer all day long, you can imagine that your glucose will be elevated. If you're a guy, you're going to have low testosterone, poor sperm quality. So being healthy is good, but don't like shame yourself when you want to eat a piece of pizza. Don't think that cup of coffee is going to all of a sudden cause a miscarriage, because those things just aren't true. So everything should be balanced with like the real data. And I know that there's so many sites out there that convince women that they can't eat white bread, they can't eat white sugar, they can't have coffee, they can't drink alcohol. And the answer is that stuff just isn't true. So we know that a nice, balanced, colorful Mediterranean type diet, with fresh fruits and vegetables, good protein, fish, like that's good. It's kind of just logical stuff. But restricting gluten unnecessarily, restricting things that you love, like a glass of wine once in a while or a cup of coffee every day, like just let yourself be. Because being a fertility patient is hard enough. Trying to control things at that level isn't going to be that helpful. And I wish that I could tell someone, if you follow this diet, you're going to have a healthy baby or you're going to get pregnant. It's just not true. Otherwise, I would have already, created that plan for people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's important, but it's not an end all be all. If you do have days where you want to indulge once in a while, it's okay. The biggest takeaway that I have gotten from this conversation that I hope all of you who are listening take away is be informed. The more you know, the more you ask, the more you'll know. And the more you know, the better and clearer it'll be about what your steps are to help yourself become a parent. Aimee, what are your final words of hope for couples who are listening in right now who are trying everything to have a baby or another baby? What do you have for them?
So my newest thing is I just teach people a very basic mantra, and I want everyone to have one because we're so busy just tightly breathing and not inhaling and exhaling, is just literally pick a mantra and just stick with it. So my most recent mantra is just inhale confidence and exhale self-doubt. Just inhale confidence, exhale self-doubt. And I just email that to people and they're like, oh my God, I feel so much better. And then I say, everything's going to be okay. And just don't be so hard on yourself. Just live, just be, just find joy in everything that you can every single day.
Yes.
And that's really hard to do when you're a fertility patient. But if someone's reminding you that, then maybe you'll do it. So I try and make things fun and easy. And I want patients, I want that energy to kind of, I want that to be contagious, and I want them to get that from me. But if you're listening to this and you're not my patients, literally just practice that and find your mantra and find things that will bring you joy. Don't give up. Find a doctor that will believe in you and just ask more questions.
Love it. And for all of our listeners who are listening and who want to reach out to you or want to get more information from you, where can people find you?
I'm really easy to find on the draimee.org website, draimee.org. I have a channel on Medium. I have my blog, my podcast, my YouTube show called The Egg Whisperer Show. So it's so easy to find me, reach me, ask me a fertility question online, privately through an email. I'm happy to help anyone who has a question.
That is amazing. You are amazing. Thank you for being here. Thank you for what you do and for changing the world one patient at a time and one episode at a time. We really need more doctors like you. So thank you so much.
And I should say thank you for one book at a time. I recommend Pregnancy Brain to all my patients and the patients who are reading it right now, because I know it just came out. They're loving it. So thank you.
It's absolutely my pleasure. And thank you for recommending it. Thank you so much. And we're going to have all the links in the show notes. So for everything that Dr. Aimee talked about today, it's going to be linked right there for you. Super easy for you to find. Gosh, I love this approach to fertility. And I will be super honest, I wish I had all this knowledge back then. I really do. Because it comes down to one thing and one thing only. Ask questions, because the more you know, the better and clearer it's going to be about what you need to do to help yourself become a parent. It's not worth playing darts with fertility. It's not worth it. And just hoping you hit bullseye. It's not worth it. My favorite thing from today was know how many children you want. Start there and find a doctor who's going to work with you to help you have that family. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Thank you so much for joining me here today. If you enjoyed today's episode as much as I did, I would love it if you can head over to iTunes and leave a 5-star review if you loved it, or any review that you feel is appropriate, and subscribe so that more women can find out about Delivering Miracles and they can tune in and they can listen to the inspiration, the tips, the advice, the motivation that we talk about on this show. And if you haven't yet, if you are pregnant, if you know you're going to be pregnant, have a high-risk pregnancy, a high-stress pregnancy, check out Pregnancy Brain. You can do so at pregnancybrainbook.com. Also, I would love to stay in touch. So come by and say hi on Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, and Facebook. The handles are Parijat Desh at all of them, Parijatdesh. You can have the family of your dreams. How you get there may look different than you had imagined, but you absolutely can have the family of your dreams. Find the right team, find the right supporters, and ask a lot of questions until you're able to get there. Take it one day, one step at a time. You can do this.